Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Do we have an echo?
Um, not yet, but sometimes the reason I was asking you to keep going is because it sort of doubles back and is a longer thing, but you're sounding good so far.
Cool. We're going to go with it and see if we can figure it out. So, first, I would like to welcome my little sister Wanda to an episode of Ancestral Muses. So, part of the problem was that Wanda's on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, and I'm somewhat technologically disadvantaged, but we finally figured it out, I think. So, do you still have an echo?
It sounds great.
All right, we're going to make it roll just the way it is, okay? I know.
That was work.
You're right, because look, you have been busy, my little sister. I just want to take a couple minutes and say thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with me. And if I'm hesitating because I'm trying to make sure or minimize the feedback that we may be getting. So, first, either you or I can share why I call you my little sister.
I was wondering.
Well, we're
You
going to
tell.
go way back.
Okay.
So, I'm going to share with you that we have the Philly connection and that we both graduated from Springside School, which a lot
Four
of people
girls.
correct, which is now, joined with Chestnut Hill Academy and is called Springside Chestnut Hill. So,
Academy.
exactly.
Get it right.
So the
Springside
tradition
Chestnut
was,
Hill Academy.
there you go. So the tradition was that the little sister class, or the little brother class, as the case may be, was the class that was 2 years behind you. So you were 2 years behind me,
Correct. I graduated in 1977.
and I graduated in 1975. Yay! So that's the deal. Said, let me just breathe deeply, and I know you got to breathe because, as I said, you have
No,
been
wait a minute. You didn't explain though. So the big girls got assigned to the little girls to sort of help
okay.
them along as we all move through high school. And that high school, by the way, I was one of four black girls in a graduating class of 40. Pam, you might have had a little bit more critical mass than we did, but
We
not
did.
much.
There were seven of us
Right.
out of a class of 50.
Right. Hey, no, we know the exact number. And
Woo! But
so,
you know what?
right, but
Mm-hmm.
those connections um to one another in that sea of Philadelphia blue-bloodedness, and not to even make them sound, because it was fun. We had a great high school experience, but to be connected to each other in that way was great. So, Pam, you know what? I don't think you were technically m- my big sister, but I have to think about who that was. But oh, Stephanie. But
Stephanie Franklin.
that's right. Yay, Steph. But um those links were essential. And then I think for you and I, your brother and I were road dogs from the
Absolutely.
get-go, and so I grew up in
Right.
your house.
Correct.
Yes.
And the bottom line is when you go to schools like Springside, and then I went on to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and it's the same thing. So there was a small population of African Americans, Africans, Latin Americans, Asian Americans, and everybody becomes family.
Yeah,
So you are like family.
absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so with that said, do you want to share a little bit about what you did when you left Springside, or do we want to jump
Ooh wee.
Start past all that and talk about the here and now.
Huh. Um, I would say the big sort of skip through. I mean, that's going back way more years than I even want to acknowledge now. Um, but I went to Duke University. I went to Temple University. I was a social worker for a while, um, living in Philly. Eventually moved to Sedona, Arizona. Started working at a boarding school there. That gave me a career as a school administrator and admissions enrollment and diversity counselor. Uh, Went to another boarding school that happened to be in Los Olivos, California, and my only neighbor was Michael Jackson. Um,
Oh my
I
goodness.
swear, Neverland was our playground, but that's a whole nother podcast. And then
Absolutely.
decided that my children needed a more diverse um, environment to grow up. It was, when you live across the street from Michael Jackson, you've been raised in a rarefied environment, right? Um,
Absolutely.
so I moved to a compromise on my urban lives because in that time I became pretty countrified. Not countrified, but I appreciated nature, being outdoors, needed beautiful settings. When you wake up in Sedona, Arizona is, the first, I mean, the red rocks is what you see when you first wake up. You get kind of choicy about where you live and increasingly where you eat. um that boarding school across the street from Neverland had a 12-acre organic garden. uh I met some folks who were very much into homesteading back then, who were my friends across time. Shout out to Patrick and Sienna Fresher in Cazadero. um and so I sort of got these values, but then brought my kids to the city, honestly, so they wouldn't be Urkel, because they could have turned out to be Urkel. So we came to Berkeley, which is great. Berkeley is a big town or a very small city. It considers itself progressive and liberal and diverse, whether I agree with that or not. Most times I do. um and it put me within a stone's throw from significant loved ones and places that allow kind of thing, and also free thinking. um and those times I was working as a school administrator and doing that. And when I bought my house and had to put a fence in, put a garden in, started growing food, just as something to do, it was better than maintaining a lawn. Associating with people by coincidence and love who knew how to farm, translate that, a whole bunch of Jamaicans. Um, and we're building the skill as somebody with a green thumb. Put in a lot of baby plants and trees, and fruit trees on my property, and cultivated a landscape just around my small house that was nearly 100% edible. And then I got chickens and I did all that at the same time that my 9 to 5 was working in by now public schools. And when I got laid off at one particular time, I decided to take the unemployment and rest. And right?
Excellent. So, so now you have
Yes.
said a
Oh,
mouthful.
dang.
So let
All
me
right.
just see if I can. And I know we are just getting
Okay.
busy. We're just getting started. So let me just share that earlier this week, I think it was, I was on Facebook and you were being like Mother Earth, uh, conjure woman, herbalist, all of this mixed up in one, given the present circumstances that we find ourselves in the
Yeah.
world with this current, with the virus, and just trying to educate people to understanding that we should be concerned about our immunity
Yeah.
system and not so much, hoarding toilet paper. So when I saw that you were like literally like this one woman, what can I say? Um, I don't even know what adjective I want to say, but you were single-handedly like the village crier
Mm,
trying to get people to understand the significance of what you've been able to
yeah,
accomplish on your
yeah,
property and how you can help others do the same
yeah,
thing. So when I reached out to you, and we were talking about who inspired you, who were your mentors, and things of that sort, you just, you know, instant message me and said, Google Leslie Alexander
uh-huh,
Lacy, which
yeah,
I did. Which you also told me that he was also known, I believe, as Doctor Cayenne.
exactly.
But what first came up, which I thought it was kind of interesting, but I have a saying that there are no
True
coincidences,
that.
only synchronicities.
Absolutely.
So what came up was his autobiography, which is called The Rise and Fall of a Proper Negro. So I immediately downloaded the book and read it in like a day and a half. And so the day that I finished reading it, I saw on your Facebook page what had come up in your whatever
Facebook
memories
memories.
or
Mm-hmm.
exactly was a picture of his hands.
Yeah.
And then you told me that you had that same day apparently spoken to his sister and other people that were important in his
Yeah.
life. And again, because I don't believe there are no coincidences, only synchronicities. So, what I wanted to ask you about, and you did talk about when you talked about living in
Mm-hmm.
Sedona, and for people who've never been to Sedona, oh my
Yeah,
goodness,
huh?
the red rocks are words cannot describe the energy one cannot
True.
describe. You have to
Yeah.
experience.
If
So hopefully people will get a chance to have that kind of
mm-hmm.
experience. So can I ask you, how did you first meet Dr. Lacy?
Oh, um, wow. It was almost 30 years ago. Maybe actually it would have been 30 years ago. We were in Philadelphia. I was living in Philadelphia, and um he arrived there. Um I actually met him through my mom. Um
Wow.
by the time that I met him in Philly, he was Doctor Cayenne. So he had been this erudite scholar who um was over in Ghana, and is actually mentioned as one of part of the forebearers to the Black Panthers. But his group, rather than join Huey and Bobby Seale, decided to go to Ghana. Needed to leave there to escape the war that broke out there, and he became ill and went and lived in a Japanese monastery to try to heal his body. And he had prostate, and it was there that he lived with these Japanese monks, accepted a vegan diet, um, and healed himself by taking on vast quantities of cayenne oil. So, as he began to move out of the world after leaving that monastery, he became Dr. Cayenne. So in
Wow.
Philly, his thing was to he moved around the world literally, and he would move into people's homes and lives and heal them. right? So those hands, he would do massage um, that were far more than massages, and he would talk to them about their diets, and he would talk to them about how to meditate and how to live, um, and how to heal themselves naturally. Um, so my mother was one of his students, and I have to say, I have joked with my cousins over the last couple days. My mother has been screaming about this apocalypse to come for
Yes.
a very long time, to the point where people kind of would roll their eyes, and it's like, oh God, mom. But and my mother did diets and religion. But when my mother found Dr. Cayenne and began to follow him closely, um, I recognized um, him as a real resource to me, um, and to everybody. Um, I also at the time had a baby, and he was in my life at the time that baby died. And we were working on, she had Down syndrome, she had heart issues, and both while she was alive and in her death, he was one of the people that I leaned on in terms of support and all things that are associated with that. And immediately following that, I sort of assigned myself to be his apprentice. Like, he didn't drive, he didn't own anything. So I would take him around, and I'd listen, and I'd study with everything, and drive him, and, just hang out with him. But as a result, I got a lot of information and understanding about herbs, how your body works, um, mind, body, spirit connections, all that kind of stuff, but in a way that was real regular versus classroom learned.
Exactly. And so I have to share that when I was reading the book, that it brought back memories for me because I attended the University of Ghana,
Oh, wow.
the law school, which is in Legon.
Mm-hmm.
And also at Trinity College, there were Ghanaian brothers that I went to school with that I'm still in touch with. And so as I was reading the book, and he was talking about places like Kumasi, Legon, Tema, Elmina. These were all places that when I was in Ghana that I got a chance to go to.
Yeah.
And so it was, again, as I said, my favorite saying about there being no coincidences but
Yeah.
synchronicities. So,
Well, wait, I got to tell you a little bit more of that story then.
okay.
So, Doc, he was in Philly for about 2 years, and then he left. And I remember we were all so sad that he was leaving, because he was like this critical, if not also infamous part of all of our lives. And a chiropractor friend, hey, Paul Bodis, chiropractor friend said, Wanda, don't worry. He leaves, but he always comes back. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Cayenne is one of the only people in my entire life that at some point or another lived in all of the places that I lived in. Right. So when I was in Sedona, he came to Sedona and he stayed there. Then I moved to Los Olivos and he totally loved that. Then he calls me. I hadn't talked to him in a couple years. He says, I have to come to Oakland. I'm going to take care of a woman named Reverend Eloise, and she ran a big Christian Science church here. And I said, great. He said, can I come and stay with you? You always got a home with me, Doc. Reverend E's house literally was 2 blocks away from my house,
Wow.
right? And his best friend from when he was at the University of California, and I didn't even know he had been at the University of California, honestly, right? Because I hadn't read the book yet, even though I'd known him all that time.
Mm-hmm.
His best friend, Jim Lacy, who was also in Ghana with him, lives 2 blocks in the opposite direction from me in Berkeley. Right? When I was about to go and pick him up from the bus station, I was visiting with another friend of mine and her mentor, a beautiful man named Carl Anthony, grandfather of urban environmentalism. And I go, oh, I have to go and pick up my teacher of many years. And Carl said, who would that be? And I said, oh, well, his government name is Leslie Lacy. And Carl said, oh, don't you mean Doctor Cayenne? He still owes me $600. I swear, right? And Carl's 83 today. When I go to pick Doc up from the station, I'm like, hey, I just ran into a colleague of yours that's a friend of mine, Carl Anthony. Doc said, oh my God, I still owe him $600. I like, and hello, that was $600 lent in what, 1960 something, early 60s.
Oh my goodness.
And guess what? Carl lives 2 blocks away from me in between Reverend E and Jim Lacy. Literally.
Wow.
Okay.
All that I can tell you is that your experiences remind me so much of a lot of what the African American experience has been in terms of our elders and ancestors who come from the South, most of whom grew up on a farm, engaged in gardening, had gardens, and or knew how to use herbs to heal themselves, which is what you do. So there is this quote from Hippocrates, who's the father of medicine. He says, let your food be your medicine.
Yep.
Let your medicine be your food.
Yep.
So earlier today, and like I said,
can I just say, wait a minute, Pam? I would say I've also been heard, and I didn't make this up, to say, eat your food like it's medicine so that you don't have to consume medicine like it's food.
I agree with that sentiment as well.
Yeah.
So you know, my sense is that we have made some progress in terms of people being more conscious of what they put in their body.
True.
But we got a long way to go.
Yeah.
And so earlier today, you performed what I like to call a PSA, because you were on a Zoom meeting and you were trying to educate people about, well, actually what you did is you took them on a tour of your garden.
Right.
And you may remember that I think it was maybe 12, almost 13 years ago, that my mother, my niece Kiara, and I got to visit.
Oh, that's right.
Because my good girlfriend, Karen Felicia Nance, who is since married, she'll understand I've always called her Karen Felicia Nance. No offense to her husband. So she was turning 50, and she had a party. And so I told my mom I was going to the West Coast. She promptly invited herself. And then that was the year that my niece Kiara graduated from high school, and we thought that we could make that a graduation trip. And then regrettably, the same time that I was visiting you is also the same time that we lost a classmate, Vernon. Because when I was in Berkeley, that's when I got the message that he had died.
Wow, I forgot that detail.
Yeah. So
again, and wait, and you also visited a cousin you'd never met, and that cousin lived 5 blocks away from me.
Correct.
Just saying.
So it's a small
It's a
world.
small world. Look, it's such a small world that it gives me a lot of faith to do in the world, because there's no way, you're right, that any of that is coincidence. And the Great Spirit has never failed me. And once you believe that you're held like that and that things work out the way they're supposed to, you don't have to worry about anything. Live free.
I totally agree with you. So, can I ask you a little bit about what Common Vision is
Mm.
and Obsidian Farms?
Mm-hmm. Um, so Obsidian Farm is my house. Um, in the urban agricultural world, the difference between a farm and a garden is whether you have any farm animals. And because I have had and have recently renewed having chickens on my space, it qualifies as a farm.
That's
Um,
so cool.
and it was my intention for it to also serve as a hub in community. I live in the neighborhood of Berkeley that has traditionally been the Black neighborhood. And there were times when Berkeley was more Black than white back in the 60s. Um, I got to tell you, all my neighbors are out walking around, walking dogs and children, and there's very few Black people among them. Um,
That's the
it's a
story
rapidly
everywhere.
gentrifying neighborhood.
Yes. Yes.
But your neighbors are who your neighbors are, whatever.
Correct.
And it's so I'm amazed at how the gardens that I have going, because they are mature gardens, are serving deeply in this maybe disastrous situation we have, right? Because the coronavirus doesn't respond to over the counter medication, right? It does respond to herbal. And they I heard one of the doctors on the news say, do whatever you do for the common cold, right? I heard one lady today say, oh, all I needed was Tylenol and Gatorade. Well, that was like a nightmare to me, right? Because there's a whole lot of other food that one could be taken for that, right? So when at Obsidian Farm, um, at the Hoover Elementary School in West Oakland, when they started shutting down the schools, we sent children home with purple collards and oregano that we were growing more for culinary purposes. We just had it and it thrived. Well, now it's straight medicine and really good for your lungs, right? So we sent.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Because at Hoover Elementary School, which is that in your immediate neighborhood?
It's about 2 miles away.
Okay, so you want to share what your journey was like and what you did at Hoover Elementary School?
Sure, because it led to what Common Vision became. Um, for a minute, and for food justice folks, it'll make a difference. For a minute, I was the executive director of People's Grocery, which is one of the first food justice nonprofits literally in the country, if not the world. It really was one of the forebearers. And after that position ended for me, uh, in a hurtful way, um, I resigned from that level of professional life and accepted a part-time job as a school gardener at Hoover Elementary. And my job was to keep each classroom of kids occupied while their teachers had their prep time without them, and to do it in a garden context. So the principal said, look, grow a garden. But really what I want you to do is do it with the kids so that, they're busy. So that meant each class had 100 minutes in the garden once a week with Miss Wanda. And and it's a very sizable garden. It's 75 foot by 75 foot, in on top of really good soil. And the kids and I got to growing stuff. And 3.5 years later, it's a virtual food forest with a whole lot of collard greens. Um, but it also changed the culture of the school. In the first year, the kids destroyed everything, whether it was a caterpillar and a bird nest or the plastic molded um, uh, closet that they pulled the door off in the first 24 hours. um, they just destroy things and destroy each other. There was a horrible day when I wasn't in the garden and they were, and a whole classroom of kids picked up baby shovels and were chasing a classmate around with it. Right, really traumatized people, um, really traumatized neighborhood. Um, in the middle of that, Donald Trump got elected. That was the worst week of behavior ever. Our population there is Black, Latino, Arabic, um, Southeast Asian, a few Africans, very, very few, if any, white kids, even though they're primarily who lives in the neighborhood now. Um, and now these kids, their test scores zoomed. Um, They know how to grow food. They know how to work as a team. Um, we practiced all of the practical skills at the same time we were constructing this garden that developed good character. Um, and so now I would say I've been working in schools for 30 years. I've never been as loved as I've been loved by these children. And my favorite thing about them now is that, a couple weeks ago when we had to send them home for until who knows um, when they talk about what do they remember the day that school closed, they're going to remember that they grew food, that the food they'd been growing for 3 years fed them and their families, and that we sent them home empowered to survive, right?
Wow.
And I'm immensely proud of that. And it was the understanding of um, the change and how, not just the change in the kids and the change in the community. I also realized that there was an equity issue because we want them to understand the environment. If we want them to take care of the planet, they have to be exposed to it. So put them on dirt, let them dig, let them watch how flowers grow. Um,
I totally
and it
agree.
gives them a context for the world. When my dad was dying last spring and I was explaining to them that I wouldn't be in school because my dad was dying, I had to go say goodbye to him. And somebody in the corner said, "Wow, there goes that life cycle again." Right? And not only did it just help me, but like it gave them, they know that life goes on, right? Even when viruses
Exactly.
come, even when you watch Curtis's dad be murdered in the street at 2 o'clock on a Saturday,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
But when you can wrap up life experiences for good and for bad, for beautiful and horrific, then you got some skills to take on. Um, so,
I
so
agree.
Common Vision was a nonprofit that focused on growing. And uh, what I realize is that schools and school districts need to understand the value of school gardens, right? And also
Yes.
have some facilitation around um, how to incorporate them not just into the academic learning, but into the district culture and how you interact with landscaping and buildings and grounds and those kinds of things, right? Yeah.
I agree. And I think that the situation that we find ourselves in today, which is a worldwide situation, my hope is that people will come out of this being more compassionate, having a greater appreciation and understanding, like you said, that they can be empowered, that all it takes is going to like a Home Depot, a Lowe's, or maybe even somebody that's growing herbs or vegetables and asking them for seeds or cutting, throw it in the dirt and watch it
Right.
grow. I mean, I think, the history of African Americans is that we have always been survivors. And part of that, I think
Yeah.
it's in our DNA that our ancestors, when they came to America, they brought with them knowledge and wisdom, which in some of us, um, we still retain it. We try to act on it. We try to share it. And I think a lot of times
Yeah.
we're misunderstood.
Well, yeah.
Because
Right.
people don't
Right.
understand you are what you eat, and
Right.
vegetables and
Right.
fruits are good for you. Don't get it twisted. I
No
like
more.
my
No more.
cheese
No
twists and
more.
barbecue potato chips.
No more dairy. No.
I know. I saw that
Oh my
from your
God. Eat it
Facebook
now
page,
before you are
and
sick, at
also
least.
when you did the Zoom.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk for a few minutes about some of the things, if people are interested in creating a gardening space, what would you recommend that they do?
Hello. I got you now.
Yes,
Tell
can
you
you hear
some of
me?
the things if people.
Okay.
What?
All right. Did you
No,
hear
I'm
me?
here. I
Because I
lost
lost
you.
you.
I think we lost Wi-Fi
Okay.
connection for a second. So I didn't get your question.
Okay. No, I was saying, if someone said to you, I'm interested
Mhm.
in starting a
Mhm.
garden at my house,
Mhm.
what would you tell them to
Um
do?
can I just like I tell one story, I would say look to the ancestors and believe you can, first of all, because you're absolutely right that it's in our DNA.
Mhm.
There is a picture that often circulates Facebook. That's where I found it, of four black ex-slave women, and in that picture, all of them are over 100 years old, and they're standing tall and straighter than I do today. And when I saw that picture, honestly, uncensored, I thought slavery doesn't look all that bad. If there, this woman here is 125. And when I allowed myself that horrific
Mhm.
thought about why that would be, because the slavery certainly shows on their face, um, I realized, oh my God, they ate organic vegetables. They worked hard with their body. They had meaningful community with one another, and they had a spiritual connection to the land. And I believe that when we went running for freedom, understandably so, we left a lot of our um, greatness back there in that earth, right? So that all of a sudden, I'm raised thinking that the best kind of love you can give your kid is a Swanson TV dinner, because that means you got all that, right? And we started eating crap, and we sat down, and we definitely didn't go and put our hands in the soil, right? There has never, ever, ever been a class of especially high schoolers that I worked with that don't say, when you say let's garden, someone will bring up slavery. And it doesn't matter if they're black, Latino, Chinese, We have issues around that.
Wow. Yeah, and that's because for so
Right.
long the legacy was our forced
That's
labor
right.
was growing all the food. And so now, you have Mexicans and other
Right.
immigrants who
Right. And check it out.
that's what they do. But we got to change
Framework.
the
Yeah. And look, check it out. I have
perception.
never, people have been saying to me this week, Wanda, how do you feel? And I was like, I have to tell you, I feel thoroughly empowered. Right? Because when this started going down, I fed my community, I fed myself, I knew how to take care of my body. I started making medicine for others. I'm teaching other people how to make medicine, right? There's the power in what we left.
Yes.
Right? But I promise you that we are only reclaiming what, like you said, is our DNA. So when you start working at it, it will click in. Right? But you got to be trying to do it. And I will say that everybody sure is trying to do it now. I got 30 new friend requests every time I wake up this week.
Because
Correct.
people have been seeing your magic on Facebook where you've been trying single-handedly to raise the
thank you for
consciousness.
that credit, but I'm going to tell you the truth of what I've been doing. Because enough people were asking me, and I couldn't tell every individual every time, I decided to throw it up on Facebook. But, I'm blown away by 1,000 people liking a recipe for fire cider.
It just goes to show, Wanda, that, people are searching. A lot of us don't remember or forgot, or I'm lucky because on my mother's side of the family and my father's side of the family, we come from this, and I was born in a little town in Georgia called Cuthbert, Georgia. Okay? And since I moved to Florida, and I've been here
That's
almost
amazing.
30 years,
Yeah.
believe it or not, it is amazing. Just like we're both kind of sort of urban people, but then when you're back in an urban setting, me not so much because where I live is very suburban. But since I moved to Florida and I would go to Georgia, what would strike me would be the red clay. And of course, they're still growing cotton. Okay. So when I went to Ghana, what initially struck me was red clay in Ghana.
Right.
So I was like, oh my God,
Right.
I've come full circle. So I think what people have to do is, like you say, recognize it's in their DNA, recognize that our survival at some levels depends on teaching people how they can have a better life, better health, merely by, making a good choice as to what they put in their body. You know what I'm saying? So, I know we got a lot more to talk about because I would love to have you share some of the tinctures and teas and other things that you're doing. So I hope that we'll be able to have other conversations. But I know it's been a long day for you. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking time to have this initial conversation. And I would highly recommend the book, Rise and Fall of a Proper Negro, because it was fascinating to me, but because it took place in Ghana and I could relate to a lot of the places, it had special significance for me.
Pam, let me just say this too. If people want to see, so first of all this stuff is on the internet, right? If you want to know what herbs are good for respiration, just put in respiration herbs and you'll get a whole list, right? And your choice of list. But I think all of my posts are also public on Facebook, so that if somebody wants to know how to make fire cider or see a recipe that makes food medicine and that kind of thing, they should go to Wanda Stewart and find me there. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else?
No, love to us all. We can do this. There's a new world on the other side of this.
Yes,
There's a
love
new
to us
world
all.
on the other side of this. Yes.
We just got to believe it. And if you believe, like I believe, that with love, compassion, empathy, there are those of us that are indeed trying to make a difference, and that love will conquer all that hatred and ugliness. And I believe that things are happening for a reason.
Right.
It's like the whole world is being
Oh,
placed in a
we're in
timeout.
one big timeout. And can I just say, nature is buzzing all over. Nature is loving the break from us. Yeah.
Absolutely, because I mean, in
Yep.
places
The fish.
like Venice, in the canals now, they got
Yep.
dolphins, they got fish. The
Yep.
levels of pollution have fallen.
They
I
are.
mean, things are happening for a reason. So there are signs
Amen.
all around us, and people would just,
Yep.
be grateful and pause,
Yep.
look inward, and try to get information that we are readily
It is all out
available.
there.
What? Free.
And the free DJ parties too.
All you gotta do. Oh my goodness! Yes.
I know. It's
Oh
beautiful.
my goodness! Yes.
Yeah.
It is beautiful. So
Yes.
again, my little sister,
I love you back.
I love you. And
Okay,
we
perfect.
will be talking again.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.